Les is the Senior Advisor to the British Columbia Coastal Marine Habitat and Stewardship Partnership. I met Les through some work that Pacific Salmon Foundation was doing with some groups on Vancouver Island related to IPCAs, and I don't know that much about them, so I thought it would be good to get someone who knows more than me to come to the table and help enlighten us a bit. So I asked Les to come and join us today, and he's happy to be here with us. So Les, I'll turn the floor over to you, and after Les, we'll have a break.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. This is really awesome. As some of you know me, I've spent about 33 years working in BC with Ducks Unlimited Canada, and I retired 3 years ago. And about just under 2 years ago, I got approached by Ducks Unlimited Incorporated from the U.S. and Pew Charitable Trust, as I had a long relationship with both of those organizations. And they said, well, we would like you to get involved and be an advisor for this group. And they already had this name of this organization set up. It's a long title, which I kind of say I work for British Columbia, and I work with and support First Nation work and providing information. So that is what I see that I can provide to government, NGOs, and also to work with First Nations. I am talking to you guys all from the Swit First Nation in Saanich, Sydney. It's one of the First Nations actually I work with at present, acting as an advisor and supporting them in identifying potential conservation areas within on the foreshore on Island View Beach, just outside the park. Anyways, well, I also at the end of the presentation, there's a slide that actually talks about that I prepared a information paper because there's not enough information out there. You have to really search around what is IPCA, Indigenous Protected Conservation Area, where is this all coming from and what's going on. So before I retired, my last 10 years in DU Canada, I spent working in the Boreal. And the Boreal, it's 99% Indigenous groups that we work with, communities that we work with, and with federal government and with territorial governments and also provinces. And of course, I got heavily involved with Indigenous protected areas. As you guys all know, there is the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, UNDRIP, and then there is the FPIC Declaration, Free, Prior, Informed Consent, by the federal government and also the province of BC. I believe about a year ago, don't correct me if I'm wrong on this, but about a year ago, just over a year ago, have also brought in legislation that FPIC is going to be incorporated into the various acts and ministries moving forward. So you got all these pieces together, and then of course the federal government made an international commitment that by 2020 they're going to designate 17% terrestrial protected areas, and they're going to do at least 10% marine. So then, of course, this was in December 31st, 2020. They were really short on acres to be able to say that they achieved the 17%. So then they started looking at First Nations a couple of years before the end of 2020, and they looked at what do their land use plans consist of, and do they have areas designated as conservation? And if they do, they started claiming those acres. So anyway, so the December 31st, 2020, they achieved the 17% and 10%. Actually, on the marine side, I believe it was just under 13%. And however, the next goal is 25% terrestrial, 25% marine by 2025, and 30% by 2030 of both terrestrial and marine. Well, put that into context. On the terrestrial side, 8% of Canada's landmass, which they're short at this point, from 17 to 25%, that's the size of Manitoba. So you're looking at, just on the terrestrial side, this incredible size that they need to designate and to be able to claim as conserved protected area. So it's a huge task, and along with this, they needed a strategy to be able to do this. So what they've done is they established a group called ICE, Indigenous Circle of Experts. And this is, they've taken a bunch of really well established, influential people that have worked on conservation works with First Nations and with Indigenous communities across Canada to come up with a paper for the federal government as to what needs to be done. So in March 2018, I believe, 2018, yes, the ICE report was delivered to the federal government. It's called We Rise Together, Achieving Pathway to Canada's Target 1 through creation of Indigenous protected and conserved areas in the spirit of and practice of reconciliation. So this paper lays out various options that we have. Oops, I think I lost my, hang on here, sorry. I lost my button, I got busy talking. How come it's not working? You know, I have it here. Oh, there we go. I've already talked about that. There we go. So these are the commitments. Sorry, I kind of got too busy talking and I forgot to push buttons. Not used to doing that. There we go. So the ICE report. And so the federal government accepted this, but the big issue here is how they're going to implement it. So it includes, there's a big lobby group and Indigenous lobby group called the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, ILI. And this group has been operational since 2012. And in BC, there's actually senior advisors for Indigenous Leadership Initiative, which is Miles Richardson, Dave Porter, Frank Brown, and Bev. Oh, I feel sorry, really terrible. Anyways, the name just popped right in my head. Sorry about that. And so this group is here in BC to identify needs and wants in British Columbia, to identify conservation areas, help with First Nations, disseminate information as far as what's going on a national level, what's going on with ILI, and how you can move forward into achieving some of these international, national, and provincial goals. And then there's also this other agreement that is done by the federal government and the provincial government, which is a nature agreement, that actually identifies the various pieces for reconciliation, moving forward with IPCAs, moving forward with guardians, and several other components. And this agreement is really critical in identifying what BC needs to do, because everywhere anybody I've talked to so far, the BC government is really not fully supportive of Indigenous-led conservation. So the reason for that is obviously, as we heard from Scott, there's various tools that we've been ingrained and we worked with for, at least I worked with for over 30 years on the various sections and wildlife management areas. But we need bigger and broader and better levels of conservation that we don't have to spend 20 years. Like the Squamish Estuary, we spent almost 30 years to establish that WMA. We need to be able to do these at a faster pace and also identify funding and have funding available for people to manage these lands and to continue to do the various works. So the ICE report talks about what are the core components of Indigenous-led conservation? Well, obviously protection, and in another slide I'll show you the various levels and various pieces that they talk to me about. And then guardians. This program is based on the Australian model, where they've taken Indigenous groups and they've become guardians of their huge, vast areas, conserved areas in Australia. And in Canada, we're also looking at guardians. And a week before the federal election, if you guys heard, there was an announcement for about $342 million for guardians across Canada over, I think it's a 5-year plan. And along with the guardians, obviously First Nations know and they're willing to work with Western science and traditional knowledge and do the various restoration works that they need to do to reestablish certain things. Earlier on, I mentioned about the Swift First Nation out here in Sydney. They actually want to reestablish clam beds. They want to reestablish oyster beds. They want to reestablish gillgrass, kelp. So there's all these things that have been depleted and nuked in the area. So they want to do a lot of restoration, and they were willing to bring the right expertise in to work on that. And along with this comes training and education. We have several educational institutions that have programs that also would help us to train the future leaders in Indigenous and First Nation communities. And also, we already have a couple of guardians that First Nations have established, that some of their young youth, 18, I call it youth because I'm over 60, um, but I'm talking about 17, 18-year-olds are willing to go back to school and take a program to learn about how to manage conservation areas. And of course, there is establishment of partnerships. It was really interesting. The last meeting I had in Sydney was we had DFO there, we had consulting engineers, we had fisheries biologists, I was there. There were some of the elders from the community. There was the band the manager, and the chief was sitting in on it. So really, the partnership was coming together to work towards a common goal. And then, of course, funding is a big component. Is We have foundations at present that are interested, like the one that actually hires me on a small contract is Pew Charitable Trust from the U.S. And they're actually are keen on coastal protection. So, but they don't want us to be viewed as a colonial type of management. They want, when they talk to me, is making sure that all we do is we support, provide funding if we can, and and answer any questions that the First Nations will have. We can work with them and help them move towards an IPCA or any other protection. Come on. Huh? Come on. I'm pushing the green button. It's not going anywhere. Oh, here we go. So I talked about the various levels of conservation, and ICE identifies IPCAs, Indigenous Protected and Conservation Areas, IPAs, Indigenous Protected Areas, OECM, which is Other Effective Conservation Measures, which is a lower level protection, obviously identifying some core um, uh, wildlife or plants or whatever the habitat. And then, of course, we have marine protected areas, salmon park, and any other measure. Salmon park is a good example out of by Sayward, um, Roger Dunlop, and CPAWS is working on a potential establishment of a salmon park out there. So he works with the local First Nation, and they're pushing forward to move towards a salmon park. So there is a variety of ways to protect, and whatever works best with the First Nation community, within their laws, within their ability to establish these areas, that is what we're encouraging and supporting. And that is so really important, because if they are taking ownership of it, they're going to establish guardians, or they already have guardians. How do they move forward? I mean, in BC, opportunities are great. I mean, BC, 94% is Crown land, maybe 93. There is incredible opportunities here for, to move forward with joint management or co-management, or in a case where sometimes the province doesn't want to do that, then the First Nations are willing to take this on. I had to put that button up there with regards to the province managing conservation lands. The auditor's report that came out that showed that a lot of the conservation lands weren't managed to the level of the management plans, etc. So, but First Nations are willing to take those on. Of course, it takes funding and ability and authority to be able to do that. Campbell River is a perfect example. We got some people that are putting their boats into the areas that the First Nation already done restoration work, and it's causing issues with the plants of with carex plantations, etc. So to date, there has been about 4 IPCAs established by the First Nations. There's Jumbo. Most recent one is Night Inlet. The First Nation wasn't getting any response from the province support, so they decided they're just going to move ahead and designate it. So about a week and a half ago, there was a news article. And there's an incredible opportunity in the heart of Fraser. There are so many First Nations along the river that could step up and do that kind of level of work. And then we got to look at, not only, as we talked earlier, we got to look at the whole watershed. From the headwaters down, including all the wetlands, there are associated and drains into the Fraser. Because ultimately, it goes from the headwaters out to the sandbags, is what I heard. The issue is we got river protection, we need wetland protection along with it. So I put together this 5-6 page background paper that explains, and it gives you actually the links to the various groups that are in ILI and ICE, etc., that I mentioned in this talk. So you're more than welcome. Jason has a copy of it, and all you have to do is ask, and he'll send it to you, or I can send it to you if you ask me. So with that, that's my quick presentation. Thanks. Bye-bye.